One of the descriptions of meditation is that it's mind training. You could say that it is mind training because you're not allowing the mind to determine what's happening when you're practicing meditation. The mind's the thinking activity, and so you're training the mind by. Did I share here about the metaphor of the elephant and the rider of the elephant? No. I didn't talk about that. So there is a metaphor that's, I think, useful to talk about this mind training business, and it has to do with the idea that when elephants are ridden by the rider that sits on the back of the head of the elephant, right? If that elephant is moving in a particular direction, and it decides it sees something to eat or it sees something that attracts its attention, and it starts to go toward that, right? The rider is helpless, and in this metaphor, the rider's like the intellect, right? The rider's helpless. No matter how much you understand about elephants, no matter how brilliant intellectually you are, you can't compare that to the mass of the elephant, and the elephant wants to go, you're going with the elephant. You have no choice about it. So then the question becomes, well, how do people who ride elephants get the elephants to do what they want them to do? It's training, right? It's training. So we're practicing here, we call this practice, right? But it's also training. In the same way, the elephant's trained in spite of the fact that it's much more powerful than the rider, right? The rider, before it attempts to have the elephant do what he wants it to do, uses repetition, uses the old, punishment reward system, repetition, right? So in the same way, through training, the elephant gets to the place where the rider of the elephant can just nudge his knee into the neck of the elephant to make it turn, to do, train the elephant to do what. Same thing with training horses, same thing with training any animal. It's repetition, right? And then once you get the animal trained through punishment and reward, you can substitute the rewards and punishment for secondary rewards and punishment, so that you could just pet the elephant and that's enough. That's enough of a reward, right? So in the same way, in this example, your mind is like the elephant. Your mind wants to, if you're paying attention to attention, you can start watching how your mind's leading you around in your life, right? That if you see a nice car and that catches your eye, it takes your attention, catches your eye, right? And then you keep seeing that car, and after a while, the sight of that car starts to build into thoughts about the car. And then you see a commercial about the car, and it builds into more thoughts about the car, and before you know it, you're at a car dealer. Right? You had nothing to do with that. Your mind led you through the whole process, right? In fact, a lot of people buy things like that, and then after they get it, they say, what the hell was I thinking when I did that, right? So this 8 verses of training the mind is interesting, and I want to share it with you because I went through a process with this myself, and I want to see whether it lands the same way for you. Just listen to this. It's done as a chant, right? May I always cherish all beings with the resolve to accomplish for them the highest good that is more precious than any wish-fulfilling jewel. Whenever I associate with others, may I view myself as the lowest of all. And from the depths of my heart, may I humbly honor them. Examining my mental continuum throughout all my actions, as soon as delusion develops, whereby I or others would act inappropriately, may I firmly face it and avert it. Whenever I see unfortunate beings oppressed by evil and violent suffering, may I cherish them as if I had found a rare and precious treasure. This is where it gets good. Even if others I have helped and with whom I had great hopes, nevertheless harm me without any reason, may I see them as my holy spiritual guide. When others out of jealousy harm me or insult me, may I take defeat upon myself and offer them the victory. In short, may I directly and indirectly offer help and happiness to all beings, and secretly take upon myself all their harm and suffering. Furthermore, through all these method practices, together with a mind undefiled by stains of conceptions of the 8 extremes, and that sees all phenomena as illusory, may I be released from the bondage of mistaken appearance and conception. So, you may listen to that and say, well, that's very idealistic, you know, I mean, that may be one way it lands for you, you know. The way it landed for me when I first heard this was when it got to the part where it says, even if others I have helped, and of whom I had great hopes, nevertheless harm me without any reason, may I see them as my holy spiritual guide. My mind went, oh no. Me too. Oh no. When others out of jealousy harm me or insult me, may I take defeat upon myself and offer them the victory. My mind said, oh no, no, no. Right? And if you think about this chant, if you think about, and don't forget this is called the 8 verses of training the mind. So what this is saying is that if you take these statements on and practice living your life this way, you're training your mind. That's why when I read this, if you listen to it and you let it in, you'll hear your mind reject it, right? Because this is inconsistent with human behavior, is it not? This is inconsistent with human behavior. When I read this and it said, even if others I have helped and of whom I had great hopes, nevertheless harm me without any reason, may I see them as my holy spiritual guide. My daughter's image came into my mind. And I thought to myself, no way, man, you know, I have helped her, I've had great hopes for her, and when she harms me without any reason, I'm going to see her as my spiritual guide? I don't think so. Right? Right? So, but the thing about this is that, you know, when it landed for me that way, I really, well, it wasn't me, you know, it was one of those things where my mind took over. My mind dismissed it. My mind just said, nope, that's out. I'm not going to consider that. I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to practice that. That's out. Somebody made a mistake here. But then I started to allow myself to give it further consideration, and I realized, wait a minute. If I follow this in relationship to the people I love the most, because they're the people who you had great hopes for, right? They're the people who harm or insult you without any reason. Or at least that's the way it occurs for you. Of course, they think they have plenty of reasons when they do it, right? But then the reality of it is if you reject all this, then basically what you're saying is, I'll hold a grudge. You know, my anger, I'll be self-righteous. My anger will be true. My anger will be right. They're wrong and I'm right, and they have to wake up and realize that they're wrong and I'm right. And until they do, and if they do, I'm not giving into this. This runs human behavior, does it not? This runs human behavior. If you look at this in relationship to the situations you encounter in your life where you're violated, right? I was upstairs walking the track, I think it was yesterday. So I'm walking the track, you know, and I'm doing it at my pace and whatnot, and I'm doing it as a meditation, you know, awareness of the body, walking, this, that, and the other thing. And this woman came in one of the side doors, right? So I'm walking, this woman came in one of the side doors and walked right in front of me. And I'm walking at a pace, so she just blocked me. Cold stopped me, right? And my mind went, God damn it. Who the hell does she think she is? I should say, hey, what do you think you're doing? Didn't you see me, right? Isn't this typical human behavior? Isn't it justified human behavior, right? But as soon as I recognized that, I realized that that's what this is talking about, right? That, you know, this unjustified. Insult me. That was an insult to me. If you're driving your car and somebody's too slow in front of you, that's what this is talking about. It's the same thing, right? So if you look in your life, where in your life you reject these things and maintain and hold on to the self-righteousness, reject these things and hold on to the idea you have about how the other one's wrong. And you know, when you look at this in a larger context, the other country's wrong. The other president's wrong. Isn't it so? You know? Because if you apply this, Donald Trump is a saint. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people think he's a saint already, but not a lot, less all the time. But the reality of it is, see, and then one person commented on that idea and said, oh no, I can't accept what you're saying because you're saying that people who are monsters like Adolf Hitler are the same as Mother Teresa. According to this, you know, everybody should be seen as your spiritual guide. According to this, well, that's not true. I'm not going to accept that. But see, there's a lack of understanding there because what this is pointing to and what it means is that when Mother Teresa was born and when Adolf Hitler was born, they were both innocent babies. They were both exactly the same as innocent babies. They had not experienced any conditioning yet, right? It was after the conditioning process that they ended up where one was a monster and the other was a saint. And nobody's saying that a monster and a saint are the same. Nobody's saying that. Everybody's saying that these people are not their conditioning, right? They're not their conditioning. Now, that doesn't mean that you therefore let them do anything they want. No. But you can love someone, you can see them as your spiritual guide, you can apply these teachings to someone and still behave in a way that is appropriate in terms of protecting other people from the damage that they might do or protecting yourself from the damage that they might do. So one of the things that comes along with being awake and realizing these teachings, not just knowing them conceptually, but actually realizing these teachings, is that you can begin to act in your life without hesitation. Because if you embody these teachings, this training of the mind, right? If you become a spiritual, realized human being that's practicing this and applying it so that you get good enough in the practice of it and the application of it, that you can apply it without hesitation. As soon as it happens to you, you can see right away, this is an opportunity to practice the spiritual truth, to practice reality, right? Then your life starts to be a different life. Because don't forget, instant karma, right? If you're angry at somebody, you're suffering because you're angry. That's the thing that people don't understand about emotional upset and emotional reaction. If you have an emotional reaction and it's disturbing your mind, you're suffering from your own emotional reaction, right? So freedom from suffering includes freedom from suffering from your own emotional reaction, which means that you practice living your life in such a way where you're free from that. You know, the last talk I gave here, I didn't even realize it. The last talk I gave here, I had been reading the Heart Sutra recently, right? And I didn't even realize that when I was editing that talk, I realized I was speaking the Heart Sutra, but I was translating it into a contemporary way of talking about it, right? Because when I said in that last talk, I don't know, I thought most of you were here. You weren't here, but right? Remember I was saying, and I was hoping some of you would argue with me, but nobody did. When I was saying to you the personality is the awareness, I think I interacted with you about it, yeah. Yeah, personality is the awareness, right? And a lot of people say, wait a minute, that doesn't fit what we've been talking about. You know, you're changing up on us, right? Well, no, it's not changing up on you. In the beginning of these teachings, we have to talk to you where you're at. And where you're at is you're totally identified with the personality. So we begin by saying you're not that, right? And once we get you to understand you're not that, then we say you are that. But when we say you are that, right, you're far enough in the understanding that you can comprehend what I mean when I say that you are that, right? And when I say that the personality is the awareness, right, I'm saying what the Heart Sutra says. Listen to what the Heart Sutra says. So they say in the Heart Sutra, you know, emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Emptiness is form and form is emptiness. And what I said in that talk is I said, the personality is the awareness and the awareness is the personality. The awareness is emptiness, is it not? The personality is form, is it not? Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. That's what it's saying. Same thing as the Heart Sutra says, right? Listen to the Heart Sutra. The clear, compassionate mind dwelling deep in transcendent wisdom, which is what you're practicing in formal meditation, transcendent wisdom, clearly sees that all apparent beings are without a true self. All apparent beings are without a true self. That's what the teaching is. What's this true self that you're without? The personality, right? Your real nature is not the personality. You're without the true self, right? Transforming all suffering and distress. Transforming all suffering and distress. So what's the purpose of the practice? To end suffering, right? And if suffering ends, what will be there? Happiness. See, we usually talk about and say that the essential, the true self, your true nature is inherently happy. We talk about it that way, right? But another way of saying the same thing is if you take suffering away, there's nothing to be unhappy about. You're just happy, right? You're just happy to exist, right? The way that'll get taken in by the mind is, wait a minute, how does that going to balance out with you've got to be in the world, how's that going to balance out with being in the world? So the realization of this is the answer to that. The conceptual understanding of it presents itself as contradictory, presents itself as in conflict with how you're going to function in the world the way the world is, right? But the realization of it is a different story. It's different than the concept of it. It's just like with the training of the mind. The realization of what is said in the training of the mind is different from just getting it conceptually and thinking about it. If you think about it, it's going to get processed with your conditioning. And if it gets processed with your condition's going to reject it. Why? Well, the middle way is the truth. The middle way is the way. The middle way is the way it is. It's the way it is. In the sense that it's not a strategy to be awake and know your true nature and be able to function in the world the way the world is. It's not a strategy, no. That is part of the experience of being aware, that you see it that way. You see everybody, for example, you see everybody that you deal with as conditioned beings. So their behavior is coming from their conditioning. It's not coming from them. If you just understand that and you really digest that understanding thoroughly, right? How can you have any angry reactions to other people? How? You're reacting to their conditioning. They were innocent. You're reacting to their conditioning. So it's very important to understand that what we're talking about here is the answer to the suffering, is the answer to the stress, is the answer to the conflict that is common to human beings' experience. It's the answer to that. But it's not going to happen just because you understand it conceptually. That's why the practice is so important, because in the practice, we're moving the concept into an experiential domain. We're moving the concept out of the conceptual nature into the realization of the concept. So you're being the awakened being. You're not just knowing about being awake, you're being awake. And being awake is not the same as knowing about being awake. But there's a difference between cultivating these characteristics and realizing them as your natural way of being. There's a difference between those two things. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You should do everything you can psychologically to be a good human being. It works to do that, doesn't it? I mean, your life will be an easier life to live. You'll have a better quality of life, right? But that can only take you so far. That can only take you so far. Because that's still within the domain of the conditioned mind. So you can be a better conditioned mind, right? But that's still a conditioned mind. Freedom from suffering means that you transcend the conditioned mind and you experience your actual nature. You're realizing the truth. You're not just knowing about it. You're not just practicing it. You're realizing it. You're being it. And when you're being it, you understand the conceptual teaching, but there's something beyond that you're experiencing as well. See, the thing is this, what I'm talking about here is something that I don't think any of us are exceptions to, right? Your mind may try and help you avoid responsibility for the fact that this is the way you are, but until you can accept that this is the way you are, you can't not be that way, because your mind will just keep justifying it. Your mind will just keep justifying and say, no, it has to be that way. It's right. It's the right thing to do. You have to stop these people from being that way, right? You don't know. That woman could have been somebody who has some dementia. Right. She could be somebody who, I have no idea what was going on with her, right? But it's not even a matter of that. You know, you don't even have to go that far, right? What the teachings that train the mind say, take it as a spiritual opportunity for practice. Anything that occurs to you that way, right? Take it as an opportunity for you to practice, right? That who you are, because what these practices are saying, that who you and I really are is that way, is free from those kinds of reactions to people. And if you look in your relationships, that's where you're going to see this more clearly than anything. If your children upset you, or if your wife or your husband upset you, or if your father and your mother upset you, right? Then that's the time to practice those kinds of things and see what's more important to you, the relationship or your self-righteous position, right? What's more important to you? Look at the politics that exist today, right now, in this country, right? This country is like, if things don't change, this country could end up in civil war, right? And why would that happen? Because people can't get beyond their reactions. They can't get beyond their beliefs. They can't get beyond their self-righteous points of view about everything and understand what's in the best interests of all of us, right? People that can't even see that. They're so embedded in their position. You know, they're so reactive in their position. And, you know, I can tell you that whether it's Putin or Donald Trump or any other world leader, you know, I'm all for doing what works for all of us, right? And so if push comes to shove, I'll do the same thing as anybody else would do, you know? But that doesn't mean I will hate the other person, or I will hate the other country, or I will hate the other people. I will understand that they're conditioned just like this country's it's all conditioning. People are just conditioned. They're not free to act in their own best interest. That's what I mean here when I say that until you're sufficiently awake, you cannot act in your own best interest. Even if you conceptually understand that meditation can free you from human suffering, even if you understand that conceptually, you won't be able to do it on a consistent basis. You won't, because as long as the conditioning is running the show, it won't allow that to happen. It just won't allow that to happen. That's why I emphasize the fact that meditation, unless you're doing it as a practice, you're not doing it. Because without doing it as a practice, it's not going to have any chance. It's not going to have any effect on your conditioning. And if you do it as a practice and you don't at some point start to apply the practice to your everyday life situations, right? Then it stays categorized as some spiritual thing, and it could end up being a position that you're self-righteous about. Because I'm better than other people, I'm spiritual. Yeah, if you listen to people, if you just change when you listen to people talk, especially people who you have conflict with, right? And the way you're listening is you're committed to getting what they're saying before you even think about it and respond. You're committed to getting what they're saying. And that's the way you're listening, right? You'd be surprised the difference it makes, because if you really get what somebody's saying, it disappears and they don't have conflict with you anymore. It does work. If you actually do that, it does work. You just
rather than judge it.
Yeah. Your mind may judge it, but you don't judge your mind judging it. So you just let that play. But not just witnessing it, you're committed to getting it. You're committed to getting it. And if you really get what the other person's saying, it's over. You've taken it away. You've taken it from them. They don't have it anymore. So there's no conflict. Not easy to do, it takes practice, but possible. And that possibility can be realized if you use these practices to realize when you do that successfully, you're being your true nature, you're being your essential self. Because your essential self never rejects or resists anything. That's the secret of being awake, never reject and resist anything. Then you're not going to suffer. You're just you are life happening when you're that way. You are life happening.